Robert.
Hello.
As happy as happy can be.
Yeah, no, great.
Maybe not.
Yeah, no, all good.
What's the, all good, apart from, what's the situation with combat stress at the moment? Let's get straight into it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I could go, 3 or 4 years back, but let me deal with what's happening right now. We have just paused new referrals into our service because I think it's because of the financial situation. So
pause, not stopped.
Oh no, we've definitely paused. No, the intention is for us to survive and then thrive. So we have definitely paused. What we've had to do is, because of income. So actually, over the last 6 years, we've had an average income of about 15.5 million per year. And with our forecasting for this financial year, it's absolutely clear that we're going to land at around 10 million. We had a previous hiatus, so about 3 or 4 years ago, where we started spending some of our reserves quite considerably. So one was a £4 million deficit. The following year was about £1.5 million.
Keep going, I'm listening.
Yeah.
This is the third podcast, I'm going to write stuff down when I come back to.
Okay.
That's all right with you. Go on.
Yep. So with those deficit budgets over those 2 years, we can't dip into our reserves anymore. They're just not there, and it's prudent not to keep on spending money. When the income isn't coming in. So we, over the last 6 months, we have invested an enormous amount of time and effort in redesigning our service to veterans, and we've landed, I think, in a really good place where we're very, very clear about what we do really well. We're very, very clear about the veterans that we do well with, and it's those people that we're going to focus on. So what we've gone from is about around a £16 million expenditure budget, and we know going forward that we're fairly confident, within the bounds of being reasonable about what donations might come in. We're fairly confident that 9 million will come in per annum. So we're going to model our service around 9 million. We think at the end of this year, our income will be 10 million. We can put a little bit back into reserves to make us more resilient. And then if we do get more money next year or the year after or the year after that, our model is robust enough that we can scale it up if funds allow. So that's sort of where we are. We've landed on a really good model for treating a group of veterans that we know do really well with that model. And if we get more money, then we can scale it up.
What's that group of veterans?
What's what?
What's the group of veterans?
So we're going to focus on those people that have got complex PTSD. So I'm not a clinician, and there is now a different diagnosis from PTSD to CPTSD, complex PTSD. So there are other factors that sort of bolt on to the top of the diagnosis for PTSD, and there's like a handbook of diagnosis, and that CPTSD diagnosis does now feature in that handbook. So it's a separate disorder. I
didn't know that. So, I know it's a separate disorder. I didn't realise that that's something that you guys are focusing on now, and that's interesting because.
Well, that's what we're focusing on with this new service model.
You weren't before, though, were you?
No, we were much. If I'm honest, I think probably we were. Charities want to say yes; they don't want to say no, and so I think we were trying to say, yeah, no, come everyone, and we'll definitely have a look at you and see. And if we can't treat you, we'll point you somewhere else, or we'll put you into a program that might help you. That's the sort of sense I got. There was a real willingness and a passion for, yes, we've got to see if we can help that veteran who's picked up the telephone. They've shown courage in trying to reach out for help. We really want to help them. So we talked about PTSD, anxiety and depression, and that we had a really wide funnel, and anybody with a mental health issue can phone us, and then we'll channel that down into areas where we know we can help people. But I think now the reality of the financial situation, allied to what we know we do really well, has allowed us to focus on this particular group, the complex PTSD. Now, I don't think, so my clinical colleagues tell me, that there is nowhere else in the UK that deals with these veterans as well as we do.
Interesting. This podcast, I love it sometimes. Also a nightmare sometimes. I did not know you're going to mention complex PTSD, and the reason I'm mentioning it again, just I'm interested in focusing on it. I've had a guest on the podcast before, and I had a bunch of them, funny enough. But I had one guest on, and she's the wife of a guy who suffers from complex PTSD.
Right.
And I think she mentioned it on the podcast, maybe not fair. But I remember that one of the people I think, if I recall the conversation correctly, that one of the people they went to try and get help was combat stress, and because it was complex PTSD, she wasn't. They weren't helped.
Okay.
I'm not saying they weren't pointing to other people. I'm saying that combat stress couldn't do it, which I can understand that different organisations, charities have different abilities in different places. What was that? So in the past where you haven't been focusing on it, what was preventing you dealing with something like CPTSD?
I don't think it was. I don't think it was something around us preventing helping those people. I think that, and again, I've got to underline my non-clinical credentials. I'm the director of fundraising, so I think that because we were possibly operating in that broad church, trying to satisfy the need from a wider spectrum of mental health issues, we weren't focusing on just the CPSD or CPTSD, that more complex. But we knew that 80% of the veterans that came to us had a diagnosis, or at least had symptoms that were diagnosable as PTSD. And I don't quite know when CPTSD has differentiated from, dare I say, normal or standard PTSD. So I think it's a combination of factors.
Just probably more presenting more symptoms than your average person, I think. I mean, Kate's husband, he wouldn't mind me saying this, he's open about it. His symptoms are pretty acute in terms of PTSD. It doesn't. I've mentioned it before, but anxiety, all that classic stuff, are just very, very acute.
There's a really good little diagram that sets out there are 3 or 4 factors on top of PTSD that distinguish it from that CPSD is distinguished from PTSD. Anyway, we could put that on our website, or we could send it to you, or whatever you want to do.
Let's send it over. Let's go back to what we started off with. So I'm going to go through the notes here. You were talking about you were previously on around about £50 million. You said income a year. That's that's fundraising. 15 million fundraising.
No,
a year. That's what you were on.
No.
Okay,
so income is different. So there is voluntary donations, which is a bit jargony. So that's people giving us money. So there are a number of recognised income streams. So individuals that give us a donation or a monthly direct debit. Those individuals who then want to leave us a legacy when they pass. Corporates who want to support what we do. There are organisations that exist to give money away, trusts and foundations. We run some events. There are also major donors that we try and communicate with and steward and bring on and say, look, would you like to invest in what we're trying to do? So that is all voluntary
Your
income.
goodwill stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So that was all voluntary income. And that is running at about 7-8 million. And then on top of that was earned income or contractual income. So we currently have a contract with NHS Scotland, which is north of 1 million per annum, and that's for treating veterans in Scotland. But then we also had a contract with NHS England, which was to put, I think it was about 230 veterans per year through our ITP, the intensive therapy program. So all of that stacked up together would add up to the 15 million. And then there's investment income. So we have some reserves, and then our asset managers look after that and give us, that we get a return from them. So yeah, all of that added up. So the voluntary income is a smaller amount. So when I rejoined Combat Stress in 2016, the way that the earned income and the voluntary income was distributed, it was 40% to 60%. So 40% came from earned sources, contracts, and 60% came from voluntary income. Now that has shifted, and we're now 95% reliant on voluntary income in a very challenging fundraising market. We're not the only people that are experiencing a downturn in donations. I'm a bit of a charity anorak, and I read some of the charity press, and we are not the only charity, not least the military sector, but everywhere is really struggling.
So the projection of around about a £6 million downfall for 2020.
Yeah.
That, are you saying that's due to a reduction in the voluntary income?
It's a bit of both. So Combat Stress has been very fortunate over the last 6 years and we call them, I don't know whether I should call them dollops, but we call them dollops, so poppies in the moat, we were a beneficiary of the sale of those poppies. And I think that netted something like 900, so way back when, okay. Some of the LIBOR funding, a couple of years ago, we put in a bid for 2.07 million, which was successful. So there was another. So there were all these. So we set out the budget at the beginning of the financial year, and we think, okay, well, this is where we think we might land. So there's voluntary income, our earned income, all that sort of stuff. And then, literally right of field, where nobody had seen it coming, we get a dollop of money. And this year, we haven't had a dollop. So that's where partly we've gone from 16 million to predicting 10 million at the end of this year.
The dollop being unanticipated, unforeseen, and we get a whack of money.
Exactly. And you can't really, in all honesty, build a strategy around it because it's just luck, great luck, but sometimes they just come. So for example, last year we had a legacy from a very, very generous benefactor who had been supporting us during her lifetime, and she passed, and we were one of 4 charity beneficiaries, and we had a legacy of 1.2 million. Well, that's a game changer for most organisations, and you can't, legacies are notoriously unpredictable. So this year we might get nothing. Yeah, we really might not get anything from the legacy income.
So is it? So if you're saying that you can't build a strategy around that kind of those dollops, if you like.
Yeah.
Then how did it end up that you were forecasting 15 million in the past? Was that just based on the previous year's spending, which included a dollop? And is it now a case of smarter forecasting?
No, I think in the past, so certainly in the last 5 years, what we've been able to do is smooth out what is in effect a cash flow issue. We've been able to smooth that out using reserves. Because we've already spent some of those reserves, we can't go to that bank of last resort again. Reserves are a very important part of running a well-governed organisation, because if things get really, really bad and you have to fold an organisation, I'm not saying that's happening with Combat Stress, but if things get really bad, then you want to deconstruct the organisation in a very organised way, and you can do that with some of the money that's in reserves.
Interesting, come on to that, reserves, because that's something that people get a massive hang up on, and I've ranted about it in the past.
Yeah.
The way I see when I look at anything to do with, and I'm no financier, I'm no businessman, but when I look at anything, when I look at the charity thing, I look at it in a way that okay, you run it like a business. It has to be run like a business. The difference between a charity and a business is what they do with the profits. Charity has profit, they call it a different thing.
Yeah.
They use that money to go back in. They invest it back into the beneficiaries, the people they're trying to help.
Yeah.
Business doesn't do that. But you have to run them in very, very similar ways, albeit I would argue it's much more difficult for a charity to do it because they're under much more scrutiny, especially over the last 10, 15 years with arguably Health Heroes kicked it all off, because they were so successful because they were so successful. When I say successful, I mean in inverted commas, because they get loads and loads of money in, and then it almost became impossible for them to please all the naysayers about them. And again, it's not too dissimilar to what's going on with combat stress. Would I be right or would I be wrong?
Well, we don't sit on an enormous amount of reserve. There isn't a massive pot. So as I've been talking about, we have been spending it to keep the level of service delivery at where we had wanted it to be for the number of veterans that were seeking help. So I think it was not last year. So 3 financial years ago, we had a £4 million deficit budget. So we were still running services at this particular level, but the income wasn't supporting that level of activity. So what we were doing was using our reserves to pay for that. Then the following year, it was a £1.5 million deficit. So there we are. There's £5.5 million of reserves that's gone. And then last year, we had a small surplus. But we knew that wasn't going to. We knew that we couldn't necessarily predict that going forward. And so this year, where we are predicting only 10 million set against an average expenditure over the last 6 years of 15.5 million per year, we just don't have the reserves to dip into. So our reserve policy, as set by the trustees, is, I think if I remember the wording rightly, it's 6 months of budgeted expenditure. So we've planned to do this, and it's 6 months of reserved of budgeted expenditure, which is, actually, I can't remember the precise figure, but I know at the moment we're something around 3.8 or 4 months. So when it should be 6, we're a third adrift. So one of the priorities would be, if we do have a surplus, is to make sure our reserves are in a fit state to go forward, to make sure that the organisation is well governed. So we don't have an enormous amount of reserves.
No.
And other military charities do, but you really need to speak to them about their reserves.
No. I only mentioned it. I didn't want to draw comparisons between. Sorry, I didn't want to draw comparisons between Combat Stress and Help for Heroes. It was just I just remembered Help for Heroes being. There was all of a sudden there's a highlight about reserves. It's why they're sitting on so much money, why they're spending it.
But that was. If I'm honest, that was Bryn and Emma's. Parry. That's what they set out to do. They were saying, look, there's loads of reserves in the military charity sector. We want to build this swimming pool at Headley Court. Well, why doesn't everybody just get together and build it? And I think that was some of the frustration they felt. So they said, right, well, we'll do it ourselves. And then it just took off. And I don't think even they had predicted what Help for Heroes would become.
No, yeah, but coming back to Combat Stress. Yeah. So coming back to the reserves thing. Yeah. You explained it really well there, I think, and the way I was looking at it was, this is one of the most important things about having reserves. And it's that, so look at a bank. Ignore a charity. Look at a bank. A bank comes into problem. A bank services loads of people. And if the bank runs out of money, and lots of people lose money, lots of investors lose money, the UK loses money, and then all of a sudden you've got an RBL. You've got RBL getting bailed out. Not RBL. The Bank of Scotland, RBL.
Yeah,
you got Bank of Scotland getting bailed out with the government. And they go, why are you doing that? Because there's so much going to be lost.
Yeah.
Same happens with companies, just banks. It doesn't happen with charity sector. But still, Combat Stress, you've got a duty of care to people. Your own duty of care that you set yourselves to look after beneficiaries. And I'm just imagining, if I'm a person, if I'm sitting with Combat Stress and Combat Stress has got no reserves and I'm in the middle of a 6-month program or a 12, a CBT of 12 sessions program, and all of a sudden Combat Stress goes through the pan and I can't carry on with 6 sessions because your forecast for the year has been less and you're sitting on no money to carry on.
Yeah.
Man, you're going to impact so many lives, which comes back to the importance of those reserves that you're talking about.
So there are 2 groups that we do need to satisfy with this. Our beneficiaries, absolutely right, and that's one of the reasons that people come to Combat Stress to work for the benefit of veterans. But there's also employees as well. We need to be a responsible employer. So, if, as you say, if Combat Stress goes through the floor, then there is employment law. It's there for a reason, and so. Reserves are there to help wind up a charity if the trustees decide that actually it's had its day. So I think and
the bigger charity,
generally
the bigger reserves have to be.
They have to be, yeah.
Because it's insurance for the beneficiaries. That's what it is.
Yeah,
and the employees.
it is.
And employees.
But then the wider debate, which I guess we probably don't want to have, is there are charities out there who have massive reserves, and so the argument is, well, why didn't you spend that first before coming to the great British public to say, give us some money? Now, I know as a fundraiser, it's very difficult to turn that money off.
From the fundraising
perspective, and then to turn it back on 5 years hence. It's very difficult. So
yeah,
it's a moot
and
point.
then also tie into that no, I agree. I know. Why would you turn around to the British public and say, stop giving us so much money because our reserves are getting bigger?
Yeah.
And you go, well, spend it faster. But then because there's so much scrutiny, over how it's spent, this
so
it can almost have a degrading effect on the quality, I think.
Yeah. So. There are two figures that I'm really proud of. So I'm a donor to Combat Stress myself. We also have the charity in our will, my wife and I. We spend 80p from every pound we raise directly helping veterans. 80p in every pound. So 20p is spent on, yes, fundraising, our fundraisers' salaries, all that sort of stuff, on governance, on making sure that the charity is professionally and well run. So 20p. Now, I am totally happy with 20p of every pound I donate going to that governance piece. So that's one thing. The other thing is the return on investment in fundraising. For every pound that the trustees put into fundraising, me and my team bring back 5. And if you compare that with other military charities, we are second only to another. I won't mention them, but we are doing really well with the resources that we've got, and I can really understand the difficulty that the trustees have, because of course the obvious thing would be, well, put more into fundraising and you'd raise more money and you'd help more veterans. But where we are right now, if we did that, we'd have to really dial back our services, and then that would put that 80p out of every pound out of kilter. So in terms of how good we are at fundraising and how much we give, how much we use resources well, I am completely personally satisfied, as a donor that we're doing a pretty good job.
Was the 15 million was that for 2019? The 15 million projected income, including voluntary, including what was the other two?
Earned income, so contracts
income,
and that sort of stuff.
That was the prediction for 2019.
Yeah. So for the end of 2020, so the 19-20 financial year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next prediction's 6 million. 9 million. 9 million.
We're going to model to 9 million. We're forecasting 10 at the end of this year.
Why is that such a? The 5 million seems huge to not have been able to see it go. Why has it not been a gradual decline, and all of a sudden now you're talking about 30% odd?
Yeah. Because.
Why wasn't it seen? Why didn't you see it coming?
Because, sometimes some of the shortfall, particularly, that particular donation doesn't come in that you've predicted. The other one doesn't come in. That one doesn't come in. You slightly underperform on that event, and then actually after a while, all of it just starts gently adding up. So I think we were hopeful of other quite large incomes that just are not going to materialise. And one of them was we launched the At Ease appeal in May last year, and that hasn't really delivered in the way that we had anticipated. So that there was a £2 million income set against that appeal. Now we've had quite a few very generous pledges, but the pledges have extended out over a 2 or 3 year period. So the income is not going to come in this financial year. So I use that as one example, but there are many others. So if an organisation that you had half predicted is going to give you £100,000 or £200,000, and it doesn't happen, and that is repeated a number of times, it soon starts adding up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's since the crisis? What would you say is the crisis going on at the minute? Since this has come about and it was announced in the media last Last week, yeah.
Yeah, it was last Saturday, wasn't it? Week last Saturday.
That you're pausing taking new referrals on. Interesting when you said that earlier, pausing, and the media choose to say stopping. Different.
Yeah,
different thing.
It's a definite pause.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is around people's, professional probity. They don't want to say to a veteran, "Yeah, come on, we'll take you on," knowing full well that we are trying to resize our offer. And I, for one, if I were a clinician and I was almost giving false hope to people, well, that's just wrong. And there was a lot of debate about that, internally amongst the exec about how we would, should we do that? Should we say we're going to pause? How long are we going to pause for? A month? 3 months? I mean, so there was a lot of agonising around that. But I have a great deal of sympathy for my clinical colleagues who are dealing with veterans day in, day out, face to face, that this was, I think it was the best thing and the right thing to do, to say, actually, we're going to pause, we'll deal with the reservoir of veterans that we've already said, come to us, and deal with those as best we can. And to some of those, we might have to say, look, I'm really sorry. I know that we created some expectation, but this is where we are. Because of course, when you go through these consultation processes with staff, people do tend to vote with their feet and say, actually, I'm frightened. I've got a mortgage. I've got a family. I've got this. I've got that. I can't stick around on the hope that there might be another funder. So people do leave. So the capacity of what we're able to deliver does start to diminish.
What has capacity and quality? Yeah, absolutely. What has been the engagement with the government on this? There's been a lot. I haven't been party to any of that, but we've got a very active set of volunteer leaders. So in the form of General Sir Peter Wall, who's our president, our chairman, Giles Peel, other trustees, and also the executive. So I know that there have been meetings not only with MOD and the Office for Veterans Affairs, but also with the NHS, and there is a constant dialogue because of course we were contracted with NHS England up until 2 years ago. And of course, NHS Scotland, who currently have a contract with us in Scotland, are also concerned, what's going on. So those relationships are constantly being, the plates are being spun, tillers touched. So that conversation is going on, but I haven't been party to it. One hopes that if we can be persuasive enough to, and I guess it's central government, to say, look, this is the service we offer. This is the group of people that we know do really well with this service. We think they're not getting it from anywhere else, because a lot of veterans say that they have tried to access a service through the NHS and really haven't engaged with it for whatever reason. Then for actually what are relatively small amounts of money, given that we do have a very generous and loyal supporter base, for relatively small amounts of money, this problem can be, arguably alleviated. So when you say generating it internally or asking for a small...
Well, no, asking. I don't know who it would be, but either health, NHS, or Department of Health, or the MOD, to say, look, actually, we know that we could do much more. We've landed on a model that works. We know it's scalable. We wouldn't change it if we had loads of money. We would just do more of it. We know it works. We know this is the group we want to focus on. They do really, really well within this program. Just give us some more money.
Is this the program you alluded to earlier?
Yeah, so this is the service redesign.
Right, go on.
So we're going to have a hub model with community outreach. So this is a small hub would be 14 clinicians, something like that, who would look at or deliver care, support, treatment to veterans who can get to that quite easily. So hopefully close to a major kind of. So I mean, Birmingham or east of Birmingham would be quite a good place to site one. And the clinicians would spend most of their time delivering their services within the hub, but then also spend 20% of their time doing outreach. So let's say there's a veteran who's agoraphobic, who doesn't want to go out in public, doesn't want to go out into open space. Well, we would go and see them in their own home, just to make things much more efficient in terms of using the resources that are available to us, and also doing things, doing many more interventions digitally. So using Skype or other video, programs that people can use, and we've done a pilot with just over 20 veterans using a Skype interface, and it works really, really well. So that's the model we would go to, and so we've got our current model is one of those hubs in Scotland. Actually, two in Scotland. I think there's one in the Highlands, like a little micro hub, small hub. One in the Central Belt, one in Northern Ireland, one in England, another smaller one in England in the Midlands, and the hope is to have one on the M62 corridor, and then probably one in the northeast, because we want to be located where there is a concentration of veterans, so that we can help them as efficiently as we can.
When you're saying hub, you mean a geographical location, a centre?
Yeah.
So you create a centre. What's the current model then?
Well, the current model, which is what we are transiting from now to the new hub model. The current model is we have 3 treatment centres: one in Surrey, one in Shropshire, and one in Ayrshire. 2 are residential: the Scottish one and the Southern English one. And then we also have community teams who go and see veterans in the community. And we have, of course, we have our helpline, which is a 24-hour helpline, and a peer support service as well, which is pretty much veterans who run a group for other veterans. So that's so treatment centres, community, helpline, and peer support. So we'll move to this hub model, which is, I would argue, probably better located than we are now. There will be some residential element to it, but less, because that's a really expensive way of delivering treatment. And some of the international experience is that arguably you don't need to do that 24-hour nursed care, for this particular group. So I think we're trying to land on the best way of delivering the best service to veterans for the most bang for your buck, for the most cost-effective way. Yeah,
interesting one there, interesting thing you mentioned there, which I reckon some people would listen to and think that's a step backwards. Is your use of your communication technology now. And I don't agree. If people think that I don't agree with that, I think that's fantastic. As long as that more use of your comms technology, like you're talking about Skype there,
yeah.
As long as that use of it doesn't reduce or doesn't compromise the actual face-to-face talking to someone in person, treatment, therapy, meeting, support. Because if you can bring in that comms tech into it, it actually means you're more engaged. You're going to be more engaged with the beneficiary for a fraction of the cost of actual meeting in person. That's interesting.
I mean, because of the geography of the UK, if you have a community team in the southwest and they're based in, let's say, Exeter, and they're going to see somebody down in, the southern tip of Cornwall, well, arguably you could have somebody driving 4 hours down there, seeing somebody, and then driving 4 hours back. Well, much as that face-to-face interface is a really good and positive and enforcing or effective thing, it's deeply, deeply inefficient. And in order to reach more veterans, having done this pilot with technology, that with what we've got, that seems a sensible thing to explore and develop. Undoubtedly, what's happening with the reduction in our finances is that we will be treating fewer veterans. It just stands to reason. But I think the really good thing about what we have designed in this new service model is that it is scalable, and we arguably haven't had that before. I've said that charities want to say yes to everything, and so we've tried to do as much as we can. But the reality of where the money is now is that we have to come up with something that works for as many people as we can treat, and that we have to be focused on the group that we can treat the best, and not just on sheer numbers.
Is there maybe a risk that with more physical locations, albeit smaller, you mentioned 14 practitioners, clinicians, that the overheads would compromise that efficiency? Because what you're talking about here is become a more efficient organisation, which has been forced by a crisis, which is that's not a new thing, is it? It takes a big drama to actually improve yourself, a person or an organisation. We know all too well that, right? Well, with more, I'm just thinking from my past experience with more locations, a risk of having more overheads, and then, like I said,
I think if you look at this from a different angle,
okay.
If somebody, doesn't matter who they are, if somebody came to us now and said, I will give you 10 million a year for the next 10 years, would as an organisation go back to our old model, which was the 3 treatment centres and community teams, and what I'm being told by the clinical teams is no. We've landed on this service redesign. We spent a lot of time thinking about it and modelling it through. All we would do is we would just deploy more of what we have now landed on, not go back to something that we did before. So I think actually, we talked about why have you done this now? 6 months ago, I think, as an executive, we saw the writing on the wall in terms of there's going to be a hard landing. And so we initiated the service redesign work, a good 6 months ago. And I think it's something that needed to be done. There was a smaller resetting of our cost base about 2 or 3 years ago, in the hope that we would be able to grow out of quite a difficult situation, because we went from a £4 million deficit to a 1.5 to a small surplus, and everybody was thinking, this is looking all right. But we realised that these difficult times were coming, and we needed to initiate a service redesign. So actually, for the individual veterans concerned who have heard over the last week that combat stress is pausing its referrals, for some of those, I can imagine that is a deep body blow. But I think for the organisation to thrive going forward, this is in some ways a good thing to have happened, because we have then given ourselves the time and space to think about what the service would look like. And we have got some really, really talented clinicians who have been, working their socks off to try and come to a position where they've got a model that works well.
Well, that's what struck me as interesting just now, where you mentioned that why has it been done now, and if you take the old model to the clinicians now, they'd say no. If you've got the £10 million donation every year and guaranteed, and
we just carry on doing that? Thing. Yeah.
But you mentioned the clinicians, so you mentioned it'd be them that would make a decision. So is that to say that it's the people on the sharp end who are dealing with the beneficiaries and the people who understand the medical side of things? They have been the lead in this transition in terms of the new business model?
Well, certainly the clinical, my clinical colleagues are represented at exec level, and the way that so we have a medical director and we have a director of operations who are both clinicians. We have a head of psychological services. She's a clinician, but also on the trustee board. So you have the main board, and then sitting underneath that are a number of subcommittees, and there is a medical subcommittee who, everything that the executive propose has to go through that committee stage, then to be agreed and ratified at board level. So yes, the service redesign has been carried out by my clinical colleagues, but it has been moderated and tested and challenged by the executive colleagues that they have, but then also at trustee level. And I've worked for 3 charities, and I think arguably this is one of the most well put together boards that I've experienced, and there are some really, really good people on there.
Why is that? What's different?
I don't know what it is about the military culture. I think.
So were the other charities not military?
No, they weren't. No,
Okay.
no. I think there is something that draws people to, the military as organisations. So the Army, the Air Force, the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines. I think there is something that draws people to do that, and I think in the same way that we have some of those military values, respect, integrity, courage, moral and physical. I mean, obviously not the physical side now, but and I think those values are quite meshed. And I don't know what it is. I'm so impressed by the commitment and the energy, both intellectual and otherwise, that our trustees put into helping combat stress and helping veterans, not for any financial reward at all. And you can think of some of the people on the board who they don't need this for their CV at all. And one I can think of is, Professor Sir Simon Wesley. He is a national figure. He doesn't need to be on our board to shore up his CV. Deep respect for all of them.
What percentage of the board and the trustees are military?
Now you're asking.
In fact, no.
There is a good representation of ex services on the board. Yeah, there is a good representation. I can't quite think about the
I don't know. I asked the question.
Five out of 12, something like that. I can't. And of course, I'll forget one, and they'll go, you forgot me," and I don't want to do that. One of the things that we have talked about in this whole service redesign stuff, though, is that we are veteran-centric. We try and position the veteran at the centre of our thinking. So I know that sounds a bit, blindingly obvious, but there's all that stuff around co-production as well, which is, are we testing what we do with the people that are going to be plugged into it? So are veterans contributing to some of the stuff that we are proposing? So, we're planning to do underwater therapy. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, why not? Because of all these reasons. So and I've just used that's a rubbish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just making something up. But the co-production thing is really important. So we are trauma informed, and we are veteran centric, and I think those are quite important things.
You mentioned earlier that not just with combat stress, but the charity sector in general seems to take a big downturn on the fundraising income side of things. Yeah. Why do you think that is, and how long has that been going on for?
I think probably quite a lot of it is an overspill from the credit crunch, so 2008, and from my experience, nothing really happened in terms of a downturn in income until about 2011, and then it just hit. I think people then realised that there had been a problem, and there was a lag to it. I think that poor Olive Cook, this lady who was a poppy collector she was a poppy seller for the Royal British Legion, and she was the one that jumped off the Clifton Gorge.
Okay,
so a lot.
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
She's almost like a talisman for how badly behaved charities had been. So, and her family said that or the newspapers reported that she had sacked bin liners full of begging letters from charities, and I think she was seen as a typical. The charity sector called them Dorothy donors, so an educated older lady.
That's what I'm trying to get in.
I don't know.
We've got two deaf people in here trying to have a conversation.
No. Well, I can hear something. I can hear. That's what it was.
Sorry, go on.
I thought it was that World War II bomb going off in Soho. So I think, so I think she was representative of all those people that had been really miffed by charities just pursuing them relentlessly for donations. And you may have experienced it. I certainly have.
Can you? I'm still missing this. Right, who was Olive Cook?
Olive Cook was a
fundraiser.
Yeah, she was a fundraiser. She obviously got onto a database somewhere, and then that data was probably being sold to different. When you sign up to buy a pair of chinos, and it said, "Would you be interested in hearing from third parties that will," yeah. And then you get inundated with, or if you go and look for lawnmowers online, then you keep on
Absolutely,
getting. So it's that data mining stuff, and so the papers. She jumped off the Clifton Gorge, but her family said she had some history of depression or other mental health issues. I don't quite know, but she was grabbed by the papers by saying, this is, charities have been pursuing this woman for donations and donations. It's all rotten. So what I'm trying to say is that started some of the lack of trust in charities. So then there was a new code of practice for fundraising. There was a new fundraising regulator set up. And I don't think we've quite got back to... I think trust in charities is building again, and some of the evidence and research suggests that. But the trajectory of income has been going down over the last decade.
Well, it is a lot harder these days
to
be a dishonest charity, because one of the things that gets harped on about military charities is there's over 4,000 or 5,000 military charities in existence, right? And if regardless of the charities big or small, if the intentions of that charity, the people behind it are honest, then so be it. Whatever. I've been the beneficiary of big charities and small military charities.
But the vast majority of that 4,000 number of military charities,
those foundations as well included.
Yes, exactly.
Trusts,
so they are run by volunteer trustees. So I think there's the 92nd foot benevolent fund for a regiment that ceased to exist 50 years ago, and it's just run by trustees. There are no paid employees.
Well, I'm a chairman of a charity, and which people don't really know this, but because you wouldn't think of it as a charity, and we have, just to reinforce your point there, we have a thing called the Parachute Regiment Association, okay, and that is it's a Parachute Regiment Association is a registered charity. I didn't know until last year. It's a registered charity, and it exists to promote Parachute Regiment, to look after its veterans and their families, and it's a military association, but it's a registered charity, and all of the branches. So there's a Coventry branch, there's a Chelmsford branch, there's branches all over the place, and almost every single one of those branches is also a registered charity.
Yeah.
And it's one of the, I understand why, but they're a charity in their own right, but they serve a very, I'm a chairman of the Coventry branch, we serve a very, very specific set of beneficiaries.
Yeah.
Very small number, tiny, but we're still a charity, and that still goes into that bigger number.
So there are probably 30...
Bring that number down.
Yeah, subsets of exactly.
Of the association.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and the rest.
Yeah.
And the rest. Yeah.
And big is not always best. We know, because we see the letters that come in. We know that there are people that only want to support veterans with mental health issues, and arguably we are the charity for veterans suffering from mental health problems. And so if we were, amalgamated or subsumed into another organisation, would all that money just flow to that bigger organisation? And arguably not. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, there could be some amalgamations, undoubtedly. I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah. There's also, I mean, going back to the smaller charities, as much there are those benefits to the smaller charities again, and I'm talking about the ones that are honest, good meaning, well-intentioned people behind. And I'll mention one specifically, and it's called the 353 Trust, and it's very small. It's family run, not unlike what Healthy Heroes would have been like back in the day.
Yeah.
But it's kept small. I think probably because of lessons learned from previous things. And the advantage that, and that's just one example, and I'm only saying that charity because I know the charity, right? And that's the benefit of a small charity is, as you become a large organisation, now my charity, as you become a large organisation, you become very much more not susceptible, beholden to rules and regulations and legislation, internal as well as external, like you were saying, boards and trustees and whatever. And for the smaller charities, they quite often have the advantage of being able to react much, much, much faster.
Yeah.
Because they can make an assessment judged on a phone call without having to validate things. Yeah. Because as a charity gets bigger, then you get more people. Yeah. And it happens with the military. And it happens with other charities. People ring up they want to get some money, they want to get some free stuff. They want to get, they want to benefit dishonestly from a charity who's trying to do good things. So you have to be more.
So you need processes, and all of that takes time.
What my point I'm making is there's a place for everything. Yeah. There's a place for big charities, a place for small charities. How do we get onto that?
It was around why is fundraising becoming more difficult, and then lack of trust and all those sorts of things. And I think also Brexit. I think people have. I know.
Why did you say that?
I know. We thought
it's done now. It's all done. You can't say Brexit.
But I think people have been. Markets don't like uncertainty, and markets are made up of people. People don't like uncertainty. So until it's all ironed out and we know what we're doing, then people, and charitable giving is completely discretionary spending. You don't have to give to charity. And I think people are trousering their cash and saying, "I'll sit on it until I'm feeling confident."
And it's less convenient to spend now. And one of the things I've realised over the last probably year is that homeless people, since chip and pin started becoming more popular. Yeah. I honestly, because I work a lot in London, and you see a lot of homeless people, and I think, flipping heck, it must be having a nightmare time of it, because I never carry cash.
Neither do I.
I've never always given to homeless people to go past. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on the circumstance, from how I'm feeling to what the situation, whatever. Yeah. But no, and it has to have had a big impact, albeit one of those ones that sort of just slides past. Has to have a big impact on, like you're saying, where's all the tin shakers? You'll get them over Remembrance Weekend on that month, get them in November. Yeah. But outside of that, where are they? Because it can't be that the return on investment must be a fraction of what it was.
Yeah. No, before. It's that form of fundraising is very the return on that is generally not great. And what we try and do is focus on the stuff that does bring in a really good return.
Like,
well, the trust and foundations piece is the returns for that are amazing. If you're a charity and you're not working really hard on legacy fundraising, then you're missing something, because the baby boomer generation is going to peak at, so they say, at about 2030. So another 80% of the wealth in this country is owned by the over 50s. 80%. So those are the people that tend to be over. Once you get over 50, and admittedly I am, you tend to start being a little bit more nostalgic and thinking about how you might help, or becoming more philanthropic.
Make sure you go to heaven.
Yeah, buying your way in. So I think that if you're not focusing on some of that, and as we've already mentioned this chat, that last year we received a legacy for a 1.2 million. That's a lot of tin shaking.
When you say legacy fundraising, you're about someone popping the clogs and leaving it in the will.
Yeah. But it can be, I have a family. I want all of my worldly goods, the majority of them, to go to my family. So, family first, absolutely right. And I understand that both as a fundraiser, but also as a member of a family. And I want my children to have a good head start in life. But there is also room to say, actually, I'm quite happy to give 2%, 5% away to my favourite charities, and my wife and I will talk about that. So I think nobody's wanting to bankrupt anybody or turf somebody out on the street for a charitable donation. It's just think about what you want to do, what are your priorities, and support those voluntary organisations that do so much good in the United Kingdom. Through whatever form of giving.
Have you done any? You personally, has there any work that's been done to look at to draw a comparison between the way the Americans do things charity-wise, support the veterans, towards the UK?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I know clinically we've done an enormous amount of collaboration. So with the States, with Canada, with New Zealand, and Australia. So the Five Eyes, and the intensive therapy program that I mentioned earlier has really been a distillate of everything that's good from those other nations. And I think one of the things we learnt from looking at other programs is that the preparation phase and some of the wraparound stuff, when a veteran is engaged in or comes on the intensive therapy program, the ITP, those elements, the preparation and the wraparound stuff, is as important as the course itself. So actually, our results with those groups that do come and stay residentially is really, really good, and that is seen as a sort of gold, world-class standard. So there is a lot of collaboration, certainly at the clinical level. And one of our art therapists did I'll talk about art therapy in a minute. So, but one of our art therapists did a Churchill Fellowship in the States.
What's that?
So the Churchill Fellowships are they are a way of if you give somebody a bursary. So the Churchill Fellowship has got quite a big fund, and it gives bursaries to people to go off to other parts of the globe to exchange ideas, to bring back good ideas, to give them good ideas. And so one of our art therapists was a Churchill Fellow in the States to exchange practice on art therapy. So on average, veterans come to us 13 years after they've left the armed services, on average.
Oh, okay.
So quite a long time, where all of the things that you and I would rely on, like a job, a house, family, friends, a sense of well-being, purpose, all that sort, have withered away. And we have found that they find it very difficult to articulate what the problem is. They just don't want to talk. It's the military man. Men aren't natural help seekers. The military male is even worse. That crack on, get on with it, grab a man suit culture, which is changing or has changed. So art therapy is a way of saying, don't talk to me about it. Just draw a picture, get some paint on, felt tips, crayons, pencil, whatever you want to do. So all these different skills and disciplines and techniques to try and engage with the veteran population, to get them to open up and talk about some of their things. So back to the original question, the collaboration between other organs. So clinically, an enormous amount of collaboration with those other nations, but then also through other disciplines like the art therapy, but not really on the. Actually, I'd quite like to apply for a Churchill Fellowship to go over to the States and see how the VA, do their thing, and how other charities in the mental health space with veterans do some of their fundraising, and what are the cases for support, what are the calls for action, what do they do, how do they go about doing it. I think it'd be a good thing.
Do you guys have or maybe not now, did you, or do you have an R&D budget?
No, we don't. We don't.
Does anyone?
Yeah, they do.
They do.
I listened to a really, really, really good talk by somebody from Cancer Research UK, and he was talking about the 10 principles for growing fundraising, and one of them was innovate. And Cancer Research UK seemingly have an innovation budget where people are encouraged to think, outside the box and think about, fundraising initiatives that might inspire people, but they're also allowed to fail. And we all know that we can learn from failures as much as we can from success.
I was thinking more R&D in terms of signs, symptoms, causes, early predictors of mental health issues.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
When I thought about, you probably would need to be a clinician to spoke to, but that's not to play you down. I just don't want to put you on the spot with something where you're not on an SME with. But I was thinking there has been a lot of focus in the US on CT and TBIs over the last few years. I know that there is some increasing focus coming in the UK on it, and the role that CT and TBIs, I can't remember what CT stands for, but TBI, traumatic brain injury, and that plays in
as a predictor,
predictor of, or a cause of PTSD and other mental health issues, anxiety and erratic behaviour and all the rest of it.
And I'm sure there's King's, for example, the King's Centre for Military Mental Health. That is stuff full of, really bright, motivated people who are doing all this sort of research, and that that's where Professor Sir Simon Wesley works. So,
who is he? Explain to me this. Oh. Sorry, I don't know. Sorry, Professor Sir Simon Wesley. I didn't know his name. He's a very engaging academic. Normally when you meet those sorts of people, after hello, you don't understand a word. It's like straight down into jargon. But he's a very engaging academic. He is at King's, but he's currently the president of the Royal Society of Medicine, and then prior to that he was president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. But I think for him to be president of the Royal Society of Medicine is quite unusual, because he's a psychiatrist, and I think that's quite unusual. And Prime Minister Theresa May, asked him to review the Mental Health Act for the nation. Is it fit for purpose? What should we do? And that sort of stuff. But he's been a very positive advocate for medics to choose psychiatry as a career choice, but also agitating for more money to be invested in mental health services. I think is it that if you wanted to go and see a psychiatrist, you're looking at, if you get referred through your GP and blah blah blah, it takes 18 months. So is it that long?
Yeah, I think something like that.
I think when I first went to the mill, it was this is a good news story about Billy Charities. Took me. It was not even a fortnight, I think.
Right.
Not a fortnight. By the time, it was very quick. It was very quick. 18 months, man. That's 18 months of that person going down the pan.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Down the pan.
But I think there is now a recognition that more money needs to go into mental health services. And I came across something recently that he was a Canadian he was a Second World War veteran, and he was the first chairman or chief executive of the World Health Organization. And he was the one that said there cannot be true physical health without good mental health. And when you look at it now, you think, yeah, that's absolutely right. And if we got that right, the mental health stuff, mindfulness, all of it, and I'm way out of my depth. But if we got the mental health piece right, then everything else, almost like a back problem, would just align, wouldn't it? And then life would be much better.
Unfortunately, it's interesting. Unfortunately, I think that the way we live, and I would say we, I'm broadly speaking about human beings in the UK, because I have never lived in India, I've never lived in America, I've
Right.
never lived anywhere else.
So probably in the West.
No, I'm going to speak from my experience here,
Okay,
right?
okay.
I'm not going to go to the West now, right?
Okay.
I think you got the physical health, the mental health. The physical health leads the mental health, whereas if you flip it round and you focus on your mental health, the mental health leads the physical. It leads it both, and for the reason like you were just saying there. But coming back onto the focus that is currently, it seems to be becoming much more into mental health now, not just with the military, but also just generally. Like I work in Marsh, it's my job, and the huge drive on there with mindfulness and well-being, just because why not? But the reality is that from a company perspective, a profit-making company, and I'm not saying this is the reason they do it, but actually you become a more productive company.
Yeah.
For me, since I embarked on this journey in the last couple of years, and especially since I started the podcast, meeting people like yourself and other people who are just more aware of that, the mental health aspect than I am, and the lessons I've learned from them, I now know through the tools I've got, I'm a more productive person than I was back then. And when I say productive, I mean just generally, not like work. I mean just generally work, personal life. I've got better relationships, interpersonal relationships with people. I fit there. I'm generally more happy. I'm generally in a better place than I was before, just through a little bit more focus on mental health and well-being. And so a focus on that in the UK or any country can only be a good thing for everybody.
Well, we are experiencing corporate UK coming to us and saying, could you help with workplace stress? Have you got anything? If we have a big if a company has a big veterans network, then it's a natural organisation for us to engage with, principally for them to support us in the work that we're doing. But mental health issues and stress at work have now overtaken seemingly musculoskeletal problems. So, got a bad back, not going to work. But it's stress in the workplace. So it's overtaken it.
Well, the biggest one thing is this figure has been around for years. You'll know it. I know that figure, but one of the facts about this that's been around for years is that the biggest cause of work-related ill health in the UK is stress.
Yeah,
it's nothing else. It's stress, but it's not been on the radar. But it has not for a very long time been the biggest cause of workplace ill health, and yet no one's paid attention to it until the last 5-10 years.
Yeah,
I mean, you get stress index and stress risk assessments and all that these days, don't you? In the workplace, you fire out.
I haven't had one.
And
You
need one.
And I work for a mental health charity. I mean, news to me.
No. Mate, we've got a couple of minutes left, right? I'm glad for your time today. I really, I know, especially with all the media stuff going on. It can't be an easy time for yourself. It can't be an easy time for combat stress. I felt that it was important to hear it from the horse's mouth. I've not had this opportunity with a charity before. That's in a experience in a difficult time, and especially with today's sort of culture, outrage, media, and all that. It's hard to tell what the bloody hell is going on.
Yeah.
I appreciate your honesty. I hope I didn't put you on the spot too much. In fact. What's the next step for you guys? And while you're telling me that, I'm going to pull up. I was going to have a quick look at Twitter. I want to see if there's anything on there I want to bring up. If people finding some questions or not.
Well, so the next step for us is to operationalize, so make happen this service redesign. So transition from what we're doing now to this new model. So that's the first thing. Is for us also to speak to our friends in government, our friends in the other service charities, to see who can help, but not sticking plaster help. It's help in terms of sustainable funding going forward, and that could be a 3 or 5 year period, something like that. And then for us to move on from the survive mode into thriving. And so I think those are probably the three things that we ought to focus on as an organisation. So transition, speak to our friends, and then thrive. Combat stress has been around for literally just over 100 years. I am certain that the ups and downs over that 100-year period have been as equally as challenging as the time that we find ourselves in now. And one of the things that I am constantly staggered by the dedication and the professionalism and the passion that people have who are employed by combat stress. When we talk to staff about the service redesign and what impact that is likely to have on their roles, because of course it's a consultation process, so we are downsizing, people will be made redundant, I imagine, or that's the worst case scenario that we discuss with them. The biggest reaction, particularly from the clinical people, was, how will this affect veterans? They weren't saying my job. It was, how will this affect veterans, and how do I communicate these changes to the people that I'm seeing? And that was the first concern that they had. So I'm sure that combat stress has been through ups and downs over the last 100 years. The need for our services is absolutely apparent. We've seen a very large increase in the number of new veterans seeking help over the last decade. And we predicted this, in the teeth of, or the thick of Afghanistan. We were saying what's going to happen is that we will come out of Afghanistan, and it's going to be then that we'll need the biggest help, because we know that there is this lag, that people come to us, years after they've left the armed services.
So outside of this transition to the new model, the focus is very much, correct me if I'm wrong here, the focus is very much on caring and maintaining the care for the beneficiaries currently in the system. Okay, which then leaves the question. So during this pause of taking on new referrals, where are you signposting people to go during this pause?
Yeah. Okay. So either to their GP, to find other routes into the health service, to other military charities who might be able to support them. But we're just trying to be honest with people that at the moment we're having to pause bringing new veterans into our service. Now I know that is not desperately satisfactory, but I think the alternative, which is chucking somebody a false ray of hope, is just something that we should not do. And I think the pause is the right thing that we have with regret alighted on.
No, I agree with you. And like we mentioned earlier, you're going to hopefully become a more efficient organisation and provide even more quality of care than you have done before. Not to say before was bad. One of the things I'm going to add on to there with the signposting side of things is one of the things that veterans seem to overlook all the time. And again, the care you get varies from unit to unit, but one of the fastest ways Power Edge can get assistance, rapid assistance, is through Power Edge HQ and the Power Edge Association. And most, if not all, military units, they have some form of association. So you've got the NHS GP as an option, you've got other charities as an option, and don't forget your unit associations. Yeah.
But also, looking out for your own buddies, those people that you did serve with, and say, haven't heard from them, didn't come to this, didn't go to the officers' dinner or the whatever it was, and check in with each other. There was a really good message from the Archbishop of Canterbury at the beginning of this year, and I think it was probably a little bit Brexit focused, to get back onto that, which was, reach out. If you haven't spoken to somebody for a while because of an argument or whatever, just reach out. Just reach out to somebody that you haven't spoken to, and just being part of the military family is one of the most enviable things to be part of, and reach out, check in with people.
I agree. Robert, been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. It's been really good to come and do this. So
Good.
Thank you for inviting me.
At Combat Stress on social media, right?
Yeah, I've also got my own Twitter handle as well, but I'm sure that Combat Stress will be pushing mine out there somewhere.
Right. Good luck with it all.
Great, thank you.
And to the whole of the organisation.